try.
Okay.
Uh, well, good evening, everybody. I am Ariel Miller. I'm the advocacy co-chair of Faith Communities Go Green, and with me is Ted Berg, the other advocacy co-chair. And we are promoting a sense of agency this spring by having workshops that illustrate what ordinary people are accomplishing in improving environmental conditions despite the very disturbing retrenchment at the federal level and the ongoing corruption and difficulty at the state level. So we are focusing on some stories that give people hope. Um, I would like to include you all on our Faith Communities Go Green mailing list for the advocacy group. But if you don't want to be included, please put a note in the chat saying, no, I'm already getting 400 emails a day and I don't want 2 more emails a month. Absolutely not. Just put your name in the chat if you'd rather not get an email. Nevertheless, when I get the link of the recording, I'm going to send it to everyone who's registered for the call, even if they weren't able to attend. I'm really, really proud and grateful to introduce our speakers tonight. We have Jessica Sharp, who is the founder and convener of Wilmington Citizens for Responsible Development, who is our David versus Goliath tonight, who has really shown how local citizens can slow down what otherwise would be an inexorable process. And we also have Molly Bryden, who is a researcher at Policy Matters Ohio, which, if you're not familiar with it, is one of the best, nerdiest, and most humanitarian think tanks I've ever come across. They really, really mine data to try and figure out what kind of policies would benefit working peoples, local citizens, the kinds of people that in the faith community we're supposed to be prioritizing. And they do an awful lot of advocacy on state policy. But as Molly will explain to you, she's also pivoting from just focus on the state house to trying to equip grassroots activists. So this is an advocacy 101 kind of seminar tonight, and we are really grateful to have them. So now I'm going to turn the program over to Jess. And Jess, if you'd like me to show your slides, I will do that.
Sure.
Okay. We, share screen. Oh dear. I'm sorry. I'm going to share my screen and open that up again. And to enlarge it, what do I press?
Green button in the corner.
Okay, good.
Okay, you can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Jessica Sharp. I am a licensed social worker, but more recently a stay-at-home mom. I know I never envisioned myself taking on a community advocacy role like I have now. It just kind of fell in my lap, really, which I'll tell you about here in a minute. But I mean, that just goes to show you that if I can do it, anybody can do it. I have no formal experience in organizing. I have, a couple of classes I took in social work school, but everything I've done has really just been learning on the go, seeing what works and doesn't work and recalibrating every so often. So about 3 months ago, it's kind of funny. I think about this like most people remember where they were when they heard that Michael Jackson died. That's how I feel when I found out that this data center was coming to my town. I remember it was November 18th. I just stepped out of the shower. I saw a text from my neighbor. She said, "Are you going to the council meeting on Thursday? There's a data center coming to town." I was like, "Oh, what do you mean? Like where?" And she said, "Behind us." And there's a farmer's field behind us. I was like, oh, like down the road, or what are we talking about? And she's like, no, directly behind us. And I was like, oh. So that's when I decided we needed to kick things into gear and make a plan as a community. So Wilmington News Journal is the one who actually broke the story. They kind of did it accidentally. They just wrote a routine piece about the school board's vote on the Community Reinvestment Area, or CRA, which involved a tax abatement that required their sign off on it. And so that's actually the way that most of our community became aware of this data center coming to town. Just in just in the newspaper, it was not like announced. There was no big report on it. People just heard about it and started spreading the word. That's problematic because this has been in the works for over 2 years now. Let's see. The Port Authority signed their NDAs November of 2024, so just over 2 years. Um,
Mm.
and NDAs are frequently used in the private sector to protect business deals and proprietary information, but not so much in the public sector, or I would argue it's inappropriate to use them in the public sector when um, that sort of secrecy keeps keeps voters from understanding what their elected officials are doing on their behalf. So that's really what sounded the alarm was that news journal piece and then all of these NDAs and stuff coming to light. Um, the day I found out that this was going on, honestly, I was devastated. We're a young family. We have a 17-month-old now. We just moved into this house 5 or 6 months ago. We built it from the ground up. It was supposed to be our forever home, and then it seemed like in a day those dreams were just dashed. And so I was outraged, and I took it upon myself. I was like, um, I've never done this before, but I have some education in social work. I'm going to see what I can throw together in terms of organizing. So I reached out to um, somebody in the community who I knew had a Facebook page with a good following, and I said, hey, I'm wanting to spread the word about this issue. I don't have the reach, but I have some of the like behind the scenes know-how. Can you help me to spread the word? And that's where our Facebook page came from. It's had a couple different names over the past few months, but we landed on Wilmington Residents for Responsible Development because we felt that that pretty clearly expressed the position that we're trying to take on this issue. Next slide. Well, I got ahead of myself a little bit, but so prior to the Facebook page, there was a change.org petition circulating, and we got like maybe 2,000 signers on that in the first 2 days. And that's how I knew that there was community interest at large and that maybe I could piggyback on that existing interest and outrage and turn this into a movement. So then that's how we created the Facebook page. At that special council meeting, because of the amount of interest that we garnered in the first couple of days, they actually rescheduled it from that Thursday to the following Tuesday, 2 days before Thanksgiving. And we had over 3 hours of public comment. So, and this is in a place where most people don't come to council at all. They do their job and the meeting is recorded, but there's hardly ever anybody in the audience. So, that's let's see, 3 minutes a speaker. I think it was something like 35 or 40 speakers. So people were upset. They wanted council to know that they didn't appreciate their voices not being heard, and wanted to put that on the record. Something else that we did early on was schedule our own town halls. Our community has done a poor job of disseminating information to us, reliable information about the project, and answering questions. So we've taken it upon ourselves to do a lot of that research, not only to hand back to our officials and say, okay, here's the information that you need to make an informed decision, but also as an advocacy technique to really control the narrative. So that has been key, I think. It puts the city in a position where they have to be defensive. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but like defensive as in they have to respond to us because we are the ones that have set the tone for how the community is thinking about this issue. And over the last 3 months, we have amassed a significant following on Facebook. It seems like every time we have a major meeting with news presence, we get an influx of followers, but last I checked, we were at about 4,200. Next slide. So this has really just been a process of guess and check. Um, I tried to take advantage of the anger that I already was seeing in the community over the NDAs and just the impression of secrecy, um, and our city officials selling out, my neighborhood and the other two neighborhoods that are next to these data centers. Um, and I use that to mobilize folks. I'm like, there's been a lot nationally over the last decade or so about wanting to drain the swamp. Um, and that's really kind of what I was getting at here is we have an opportunity to really drain the swamp locally. Let's expose the corruption. Let's bring all this to light. And so I dug back through meeting minutes and videos, and I kind of put together like an expose of city council and the planning commission going back over the last year. And piece by piece, I have put together how this deal came together, um, and outlined really where the procedural failures were and what power we still have to change the outcome. So that I think it's kind of like watching like a crime documentary or podcast, the way I have it kind of formatted. But that's what I've used to kind of keep people engaged and also to keep the city on their toes of, we've caught you in this and now you have to answer for it. Word of mouth has also been essential in a small town, social media and traditional media as well. So we share things, I cross post things on different coalition pages for data centers. I call WCPO, WHIO, WL, WT, and a variety of other news channels before every meeting or town hall that we put on to try to maximize our presence in the media. And then we've also done things like door hangers, passing out flyers, submitting letters to the editor, just anything we can do to get our information in front of the largest audience possible. That's kind of been the approach. Next slide. So I spoke a little bit about controlling the narrative. That's really been the goal of the town halls that we do and the media coverage there. And it's also for education and just a space for people to meet in person and have that Q&A that's really been missing in the council setting. Um, and then again, just exposing procedural failings and corruption at the local level just by doing that deeper dive and posting that for all to see has been helpful. I've also been working with a consultant with the Community and Environmental Defense Service. His name is Richard Klein. He's been really helpful in really helping me to get my feet wet with the issue of data centers in general, and has also connected me with different organizations like Good Jobs First and Policy Matters Ohio, and helped me to establish that professional network that I needed to obtain quality testimony to take back to our decision makers. So he helped me to get, let's see, a noise testimony, air pollution testimony, and a handful of others. And then we presented that before the Planning Commission back in January. So it's really important to have credible information from, credentialed folks that you can point to when you're making your arguments to say, hey, this is why you need to listen and take this seriously. So at the same time that we're putting maximum pressure on the city and exposing defects in the process, we're also trying to make sure that we have a professional tone to maintain our credibility. The goal is, if they're going to have a disagreement with us, it's going to be over content, not the way that we're going about things. So that's been really important as well, just kind of not giving them anything that they can latch onto and then dismiss you. We've also done a considerable amount of lobbying work with council members who've been receptive and encouraged them on and off the record that they need to take a position. Their constituents need to know where they stand on this issue. And so it's not acceptable to just stay silent and just make decisions behind closed doors. We've also relied heavily on public records requests to bring together or bring to light things like conflicts of interest, NDAs, lawyer engagement letters. That's how we found out that the Port Authority was contracted with Voris. That's a very prestigious law firm known for representing data center deals. Next slide. So to touch a little bit on strategy for the media, I found it helpful to call reporters directly. We've tried a couple different things, calls and emails. Emails have been okay for like ongoing correspondence when you've already kind of developed a relationship with someone, but um, to get, sorry, Kat, to get a station interested for the first time, I found that phone calls are more effective for that. Personally inviting them to meetings, letting them know what's going on and when, and um, why they should care, basically. A lot of these media stations have also been running um, like longer stories about data centers in the tri-state. And so just kind of weaving our struggle into that has been helpful for them to write a cohesive story. When you do interviews, it's important to have shared talking points like within an organization, but always to make sure that you're speaking authentically um, and to points that people can relate to. So one of the first interviews I did, I spoke to, again, my story and the Forever Home, Dreams Dashed, all of that. And that really seemed to resonate with folks, like more than I imagined it would. Um, Folks also really like um, highlighting transparency issues, especially in the current political climate. So that's been effective for engagement as well. And then, as much as you can, you want to get a hold of large news sources like national media. There are some influencers too I spoke with. Who was this? Stay Inspired News. I think they're like an online only um, platform, but that really helped our member engagement as well. Next slide. So, what can you look out for? Um, if you're like me, you don't want to be finding out that a data center is coming to your backyard when um, it's too late and rezoning has already taken place. So what you can do in the meantime is be scouring your meeting minutes, your city's meeting minutes for code names. Like in our case, it was called Project Apollo. Um, or if things are only being referred to by the parcel number and they aren't giving you like an address, um, or it's a really vague owner name, like a developer. I'm trying to think of an example. Or like a shell company is the developer, like something you've never heard of. Those are red flags to dig in on more, and that's when you would want to enter those public records requests and see what turns up. We've also found with records requests, you have to continue to apply pressure to get those returned. Um, Under Ohio law, they have it's called a reasonable amount of time to get those answers back to you, but it's not defined anywhere. So you have to really stay on top of them to get that information back. The reason I say that too is because one of my colleagues had a records request in for the city's NDAs like 7 months ago, and those were never returned in full. And had they been, they would have turned up this project. So really important that you're holding the city accountable when you do make requests like that. You can also be on the lookout for major infrastructure improvements. Where we're at, we have AES for utilities, and they have something called the Clinton Fayette project or transmission line, something like that. But there's a 345 kilovolt line running down to Wilmington from Fayette County. And if you'll notice, there is a substation right where this data center is going to go. So if we had connected some of those dots sooner with the infrastructure that was already coming in, we might have been able to piece this together. Let's see. Just some other general tips. Looking for high dollar land purchases or even listings on Zillow. Like for example, if you see farmland listed for $200,000 an acre, that's a red flag around here. And then also in meeting minutes, if you see text amendments for your zoning code, like with the Planning Commission, you're going to want to dig in and see what that's about. 1 month before the Amazon data center parcel was rezoned to light industrial, the Port Authority came before the Planning Commission and requested to make data centers light industrial. So again, that's something that if we had known what to look for, we could have seen coming potentially. Let's see. Again, it's really important if you can catch these things before zoning is finalized that you're getting involved at that point because once zoning is finalized, the buyer of the land has some vested interest in the property. Next slide. So how to monitor these things early? Again, just reading Planning Commission and City Council agendas and minutes. Show up to meetings, and if you can't, see if there's a recording online. But I would just, always be skimming agendas and looking for red flags or large parcels with vague descriptions for projects. Wilmington also has a city email alert list, like a listserv. If your city has something similar, you can sign up for that. I would also recommend any community form a watchdog group, kind of like what we're already doing in Wilmington Residents for Responsible Development, and just keep an eye on, those meeting agendas, um, and have folks like at the ready, available to attend meetings and provide testimony on short notice when you see something that doesn't look right. I also want to draw your attention to a link here. It's bansecretdeals.org. I want to say it was Good Jobs First pointed me to that resource, but that's where I learned a lot of these tips as well about how to catch a secret deal early. Next slide. Okay, coalition building. So this has really been a work in progress. It's just something that I've learned on the go as I've been doing this work over the last couple of months. I found that there's a lot that I don't know in this process, and the approach that's been successful for me is trying to identify the people who can fill my knowledge gaps. And through that process, I've connected with different communities. I speak with a mayor in Central Ohio, an HOA president in Pennsylvania, a handful of different nonprofit organizations here in the state. Just anybody I could get access to who's been down this road. I've tried to get in touch with those folks and just kind of pick their brain and go from there. It's also important to have connections with other communities to make sure that you're providing a unified message at the State House. The mayor that I talk with in Central Ohio said he's concerned that there's so much noise that goes to representatives at the State House that sometimes they can't pick out what information is most important. But if you're able to come together, like I'm in a group chat with Tri-State data center community leaders. If you're able to put together a cohesive 5 or 10 point, summary, and you guys are all sticking to it, you're more likely to get a response presenting those same points with numbers behind them. Networking has also been really important. I've never really had much taste for politics, but now I have Greg Landsman's cell number, which is weird to me. But if you have access to your local representatives or someone who has an in with them, absolutely capitalize on that because that's what lobbyists do too. So if you can get somebody's ear and tell them about the issues that are important to your communities, unfortunately, the truth is you'll go farther that way. Also, you want to be inviting those folks to any community meetings you have going on. So like those town halls that we've put on, Greg attended one of those. A couple other representatives attended as well, or hopefuls for this year's election. So capitalize on that for exposure too. I think I've already touched on the other 2 points. Next slide. So something I've talked with folks about a lot is how do you take people from being mad on social media to actually doing something? And the framework that I've kind of used draws on some principles that I'm familiar with from my education in psychology and social work. But basically, I've just been empowering people by saying along the lines of, if you have an idea and you suggest it, I'm going to turn it back on you to lead it. So early on, I had a lot of people saying like, well, have you thought about this or done this and called ODNR and that? And I'm like, no, I haven't. That's a great idea. Can you make that call tomorrow morning? And you'd be surprised how if you give someone a clear and specific directive and make it time limited and address it to them, it's kind of like addressing the bystander effect, right? You want to give folks a clear directive of what you're asking them to do, and they actually will do it, like a lot of the time. So yeah, and then the more that you ask people to do little things like that, the more investment that they actually develop in your movement as a result. So this is actually called the foot in the door approach. It's actually like a sales tactic. But basically, if you have folks and they've already done something small for you, they're more likely to do something larger and larger and larger over time. And you can use that to your advantage in organizing to develop kind of your key team. So the team that I work with now, there's probably 15 or 20 folks I talk to on a regular basis. Um, and everybody's got their own like subcommittee of things that they're interested in, um, like in the background. But I just took the people who, were posting a lot on the page at the beginning, showed a lot of interest, and kind of directed that interest towards the outcomes that I saw that we were needing to achieve. So from that, that's how we formed subcommittees based on what our needs were and what folks' strengths were, and went from there. I also want to touch on my like organizational structure. So I'm a social worker by trade, even though I've been out of the workforce for a couple years. And something that really stuck with me when I was in school was trauma-informed leadership. Um, and there's a lot to this, but some of the major tenets are that of shared leadership. So I really avoid like a hierarchical structure in the work that we're doing. A lot of people see me as like the leader, but I really don't like that because I'm not the leader. I'm just one person trying to organize other people um, to come together with this end goal. So I really believe that everybody has equal say and equal power in the work that we're doing here as a group. Um, and we share those decisions together based on consensus. With that too is the idea of democracy. So again, it's shared leadership, but it's also everybody having a voice, and the group kind of organizing around what the needs are of its members. Next slide. Okay, I think we're coming to the end here. Yeah, this is the last slide. So I just want to encourage you all, don't give up the ship. Things look hopeless. When I started this work 3 months ago, there was hardly anything in the local and national news about data centers, but now there's at least three pending pieces of legislation in the House to do with data centers. And I'm hearing more and more calls at the state and national level for moratorium. It hasn't happened for Wilmington, but even down the street in Blanchester, Blanchester just put in a moratorium for data centers, so we are gaining traction. And that's not attributable to any one movement, but really the voice that we have all raised up together um, has been really significant, I think, in kind of changing the culture around this issue. So when you're feeling hopeless, just think about the work you're doing now. Um, and then when you look back on it in 3 months, you'll be really amazed at what you can do. So that's all I got.
That was just absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for uh, empowering us with this overview. And I'm really sure that people are going to want to ask you more when we do some questions. I'm going to turn it over to Molly Bryden now to share her insights from a statewide perspective, kind of working with people to empower them at the grassroots.
Great. Thank you, Ariel, and thank you, Jess, for all that very helpful and meaningful insight. I'm going to figure out how to share my screen real quick. Okay, here it is, sorry. Okay, so my name is Molly Bryden. I'm the Climate and Sustainability Researcher with Policy Matters Ohio, and we're a nonprofit bipartisan research organization working to build a more vibrant, equitable, and sustainable and inclusive Ohio through policy research, advocacy, strategic communications, and coalition building. So we've been developing a lot of work around the data center issue here in Ohio, and we have a lot underway. I just wanted to share some of the previous work that we have put out around data centers in Ohio. And I can paste the links in the chat in a moment. So back at the beginning of last year, our research director put out a report on sales tax exemptions for data centers, and found that the state is forfeiting a lot of revenue basically to subsidize the data center industry here in Ohio. So we I'll share about our broader policy platform, but a lot of that does focus on state and local taxpayer subsidies for data centers. Like Jess mentioned, we co-wrote an open letter to Wilmington City Council in response to that community reinvestment area agreement that was essentially a 30-year 100% property tax abatement for a $4 billion Amazon data center that was slated to come to Wilmington. And so that was we used that to support local organizing efforts, but they effectively paused further development around that project, largely due to the really strong organizing efforts that Jess spearheaded in Wilmington. So our plan is to use some of the insights that we're hearing from local community members to develop a more coordinated network across the state and pull in other partners to help build out those efforts to kind of scale the work that Jess has been doing, and also so it doesn't all fall on Jess, because I know that she's been doing a lot here in the state and the surrounding area. We also just released a FAQ on data centers today, and that is accompanied by a broader policy platform to try to guide responsible development decisions around data centers here in Ohio. And I'm going to run through that really quickly. And I'm happy to share these slides after this presentation, but broadly, our policy platform is focused on ways to tackle the data center issue from a range of angles, which include eliminating state and local taxpayer subsidies for the data center industry, and increasing opportunities to generate community benefits and enhance guardrails around data center development. Also establishing strong labor standards tied to data center construction projects and once they're operational, and increasing democracy and transparency measures to enable communities to have a meaningful impact on decisions that really have a huge impact in their communities. And then lastly, we want to strengthen protections for electricity ratepayers and our natural resources to ensure that Ohio communities aren't footing the bill for data centers' grid impacts or the strain that they put on our natural resources. Okay, so this is just looking at the level of support that the state lends to the data center industry. So between fiscal years 26 and 27, the state estimates that the data center sales tax exemption will cost us around $140 million per year. And then at the same time, we're seeing a lot of local property tax abatements pop up between municipalities and data centers, which further risk local revenue streams. And then just to kind of contextualize the amount of state revenue that we're forfeiting under the sales tax exemption for data centers, the amount of state revenue that we're foregoing will increase to over 140 million by fiscal year 24. And at the same time, we allocate only 37 million from the general revenue fund, which is the only form of state generated revenue used to support statewide transit systems. That's just another area of my work, and I think it really shows like where the state legislature's priorities lie. And then the next, and I think this is maybe one of the most important elements within our policy platform, is increasing the use of community benefits agreements for large-scale data center projects. So community benefits agreements, or CBAs, are legally binding agreements that essentially serve as an umbrella for advancing other policy priorities at the local level. So if a community is interested in strengthening a data center deal and proceeding with caution, just to make sure that there are sufficient guardrails in place to mitigate all the economic and environmental harms that could be generated by irresponsible data center development, they can negotiate a community benefits agreement, which is negotiated between developers and community coalitions, which comprise residents, labor stakeholders, and environmental advocates, which enable communities to secure commitments from companies to invest in things like residential weatherization programming, local biodiversity or resilience efforts, infrastructure upgrades that are needed to support data centers growth, and then setting requirements around renewable sourcing, emission control equipment, which is particularly important when we're thinking about the backup diesel generators that data centers often use, and other like water and energy efficiency measures, along with strong labor standards. And then because we want to have a measured approach around all of these data center decisions that are ramping up across the state, we think it's important to understand the nuance and the opportunities that it could open up for the building and construction trades and other unions like IBEW, which has a lot of electrical workers as their members. So they do generate a substantial amount of work for laborers and electrical workers during the construction phase, which opens pathways to good union jobs and training opportunities through apprenticeship. But there are certain ways to ensure that the jobs on these construction projects are good union jobs with family sustaining wages and sufficient benefits. And that can be achieved through a project labor agreement or a PLA. And if you're aware of your local labor council and their interest in attaching a PLA to one of these projects, you can support that. And there are a range of ways that you can ensure like good, like high roads jobs that are created under this data center build out. And also, so once a data center is operational, sorry, I'm reading the chat. The construction timeline kind of depends on the size of the project, but it could last for like honestly around a year. I think my colleague Bailey Sandin might be in here who could offer more information, but it is creating a lot of consistent and stable work for the trades, which is an important consideration. And I think understanding those implications is important for kind of building inroads with labor to kind of develop this strategic alignment around certain provisions that can achieve win-win situations for both labor and environmental advocates, along with the broader community, which I can talk about more, answer more questions after this. But once the data center is in operation, they employ a relatively low number of workers full time, but there are also there are also a lot of indirect jobs created by data center development, and that's estimated around 6 times the number of permanent full-time jobs, though those indirect jobs are often contracted out. So communities can secure long-term commitments to good jobs and labor standards by negotiating project labor agreements and including provisions that would support investment in the local workforce development ecosystem through a CBA or other development agreement. And then, like Jess mentioned, one of the key concerns around data center development is the lack of transparency and how these decisions are made behind closed doors without any real opportunities for community engagement until the very last hour, when it is often too late to actually have a meaningful impact on what those decisions look like in your community. And so our policy platform is trying to support democracy and transparency around proposed data centers and establish improved community oversight mechanisms so that local communities can have a full understanding of the real material impacts that data centers will have in their community. And we can do so by prohibiting non-disclosure agreements between local governments and data center companies and increasing opportunities for public engagement in important development decisions. And then I know that there's been a lot of concern around data centers and their connection to the increasing energy affordability crisis. So this is using data from the Energy Information Administration showing the average utility bill for residential customers in Ohio, which have increased by almost 35% between 2016 and 2025, despite relatively flat demand, which has ultimately decreased. The 9.3% decrease isn't a super significant stat, but like overall, you can see that residential energy demand has not increased substantially over the last 10 years, while demand from commercial customers has increased by over 24%. And data centers are included in the commercial customer class. So we're striving to advance protections for Ohio ratepayers, communities, and natural resources. Also, something that we haven't dug into super deeply at this point, but I know a lot of groups are working on this, is data centers' water use. But we can try to mitigate all of the environmental harms generated by resource-intensive data centers by requiring them to pay their fair share of grid upgrades and generation investments needed to connect them to the grid, while also strengthening and advancing state and local policy mechanisms that can mitigate environmental harms. And that can be done through a CBA at the local level or by enhancing and strengthening regulation at the state level. And I can kind of speed through this. This is kind of the state legislation roundup. So the bills that have been introduced so far, some of them would set up stronger guardrails around data center development, those are mainly House Bill 695 and House Bill 706. So House Bill 695 would prohibit non-disclosure agreements for certain local officials. It's not explicitly about data center development, but it would impact local government's ability to enter into NDAs with data center developments. And then House Bill 706 would essentially create a statewide data center tariff, which is similar to what we saw under the PUCO decision that created the AEP data center tariff, which sets capacity commitment requirements, which basically makes sure that data centers are paying for their fair share of investments in our electricity infrastructure, and also protects communities from the risk of stranded assets were data centers to cease operations in the state. It just protects electricity ratepayers, particularly small businesses and residential ratepayers, from paying for the grid impacts of data centers. And then there's a bill that would create a data center study commission, which we are more neutral on at this point, but I know that Jess is following it. There are a range of important considerations that it would require the commission to look at in order to develop a more formalized and informed plan on data center development and regulation in the state. But the one thing is it does include national security and implications for AI advancement in those considerations, which does open up conversations around the value of data centers that kind of neglect the actual local impacts that they can have. And then Senate Bill 367 would allow a sales and use tax exemption for certain projects, which is essentially targeted towards data centers. If a county official or port authority were to deny a similar tax agreement between the local government and a data center, then the state could essentially override that decision. I haven't looked at this one too closely. It was just introduced a week ago, and it hasn't been assigned to a committee yet. So there's not been any real movement behind it at this point, but it's just something that we will definitely keep an eye on and let folks know when there are opportunities to advocate at the state level. And again, going back to the sales tax exemptions, the legislature did pass a budget that would have eliminated the data center sales tax exemption, but unfortunately that was line item vetoed by Governor DeWine. But there is some appetite within the legislature to override that veto. And there's also a slate of bills that the Senate Democrats are considering and hoping to introduce soon to kind of rein in the data center situation here in Ohio. And lastly, here's our plan for our upcoming work around data centers. We are hoping to build out a statewide strategy table to support and convene local community members like Jess and all the other people that she's been working with to support local site fights and resistance against bad data center deals coming to Ohio. We ultimately will develop tools and resources to support these efforts, and the policy platform that we have released has we're hoping to build on that over time and use all of the research and like communications that we've had with concerned residents and local officials to better inform that and refine it. And so far we've been working with groups in 12 counties across the state, and we're hoping to build that out and pull in other partners like Fair Shake Environmental Network or Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services and Buckeye Environmental Network, Power Clean Future Ohio. I know OEC, Ohio Environmental Council, is doing a lot of work around this. And that reminds me I need to send a couple of follow-up resources about this. But our next steps are pulling in people from other communities to start engaging on this work and also to kind of centralize these communications so that we can provide this support at scale. Just in conversations with partners, I know that we're kind of strapped on capacity to provide the level of support that's needed to push back in a meaningful way. So we're hoping to bring everyone together and create this statewide network of supports so we can make sure that communities have the power that they need to determine what the data center landscape looks like in their communities. And that's it. I'm sorry I took too much time, but we would love to hear from you about how we could best support you in your work around data centers in the state. And stay tuned for more to come.
You did not take too much time. Both of you just did an awesome job. For those who joined the meeting after we started, this is Faith Communities Go Green hosting this program by Jess Sharp and Molly Bryden on grassroots and statewide coalition building to mount a really good fight against bad data center deals. Everybody who's registered for this call will get a copy of the slides and a follow-up email, and everybody will get a link to the recording once we have that, and you can share that. We're going to open it up now for questions, and if you could stop the screen share, Molly, what we'll do is we'll all be able to see each other. And if you want to ask a question, why don't you raise your hand and unmute? And then,
Is there a way to pin myself so folks can see both of us?
sure,
I don't know how to do that.
I don't know how to do it. There, that's great.
Oh, okay.
Well done. So I don't see any hands, but if people want to go ahead and ask a question, unmute and ask a question.
Nope. Didn't mean to do that.
I saw in the chat, Mike Eck wanted to know how is it that data centers would be charged a sales tax? For what kinds of activities would they pay a sales tax?
It basically covers any like equipment that they would need to invest in. So basically all of the servers that are used in the data center, and then other like construction costs. We have our tax researcher and then our research director who wrote that report is definitely more knowledgeable about like the specific elements of that sales tax exemption.
Thank you. That helps.
And from the people who joined from various communities, like the League of Women Voters members, do you have any questions after hearing these presentations?
Okay, I see one here in the chat. I'm going to take that one if I can. I swear I've been out of the workforce for 2 years and I'm somehow inept with Zoom now. Okay, Jess, what has been the result of your work on your local data center so far? Has your late start limited your effectiveness? We're going to see how this all shakes out. We do have some legal options that we're exploring to continue to combat the Amazon data center. There's nothing we can do at this point, like with city council on the zoning, and the parcel's already been sold to Amazon. But we are going to continue fighting. I'll just say that. There will be more released soon about that. We are also continuing to lobby our planning commission and just put great testimony into the record showing why the Amazon data center is not appropriate for the site that it's proposed for. It's really not a light industrial use, and that's what they're trying to say it is. So we're focused at this point on putting excellent testimony into the record. So if we need to appeal a decision down the road, that process has been started. So at the Planning Commission meeting in January, again, we had like 40 speakers, 3 hours of public comment, and that resulted in that proposal being tabled. It has not come back before the commission for February, and it will not come back in March. The next time that it potentially could come back before the Planning Commission is in April. So it hasn't been denied outright, but we definitely have slowed their roll a little bit. And put the Planning Commission on notice that we are going through this with a fine-tooth comb and assessing the proposal for compliance with the site plan review process. So that's what's going on with Amazon. If you've been following what's going on in Wilmington, we also have another potential data center with a company called Ardent Acquisitions. And our city council just voted to approve the rezoning for 4 parcels totaling 545 acres just this past Thursday. So we are currently in the midst of a ballot referendum, trying to put that issue on the ballot for voters to make the decision for themselves in November if they want that rezoned for that capacity. So it's not over yet.
Ren has a couple good questions. How can non-disclosure agreements be legal for public officials? And what are they hiding? And what kinds of vile things have they agreed to? And then what corruption have you found in Wilmington?
Yeah, so we're not totally sure that they are legal. That's something that we're currently trying to dispute. And that's why House Bill 695 is so um, exciting that we might have some legislation at the state level if that makes that through. Um, to support what the people have been saying all along, which is that it's not right that your elected officials are going into private deals with companies and keeping you on the sidelines. So we believe that there are some sunshine law violations there potentially with elected officials working in that capacity. But that's something that's going to have to shake out higher than us.
Do you want to
But
share about the corruption that you've been?
yeah, so let's see. Gosh, where do we begin? A lot of what's going on in Wilmington actually traces back to the Planning Commission, or I'm sorry, not the Planning Commission, the Port Authority. The Port Authority is the one who brokered the deal with AWS for this project. We have since uncovered some questionable behavior at best by the economic developer, um, director of economic development, um, in some of his interactions with the Planning Commission. Specifically, last June, I mentioned there was um, a change to the zoning code to allow data centers to be light industrial. If you go back and actually listen to the testimony he presented requesting that change, he never mentioned that there was a project in the works that would be coming before them next month. And he only said the word data center one time. So he focused his entire testimony on what I believe were decoy issues, like additive manufacturing, and um, somebody out in the county had an issue with not being able to do 3D printing, and he was making the argument that that needed to be considered light industrial on those grounds, being in that category of manufacturing. But what he was actually doing, we believe, was setting the groundwork for this Amazon project on that parcel. And then again, the very next month, he came back before the Planning Commission, did not discuss data centers, did not say hyperscale, nothing like that. All he said was that they have been working for the last 18 months on a quote, incredible opportunity for Wilmington, and that the property owner, who is a 95-year-old woman in a nursing home, wanted to pursue industrial development on her property requiring city utilities. That was the justification for that rezoning and annexation. So it's just that kind of shadiness and lack of transparency that we've seen and come to expect over the last several months. But then, as far as city council is concerned, they signed their NDAs in October of 2025, which was actually after they had already taken these key votes. So they were really voting blind, um, which is that's a problem of its own in that they weren't doing due diligence and asking questions before voting. But a lot of things were passed as emergency measures, limited or no deliberation, just stuff like that is what we've uncovered.
I want to
I
take this.
also
Go ahead, Ma.
I want to highlight how like in unincorporated areas that don't have the comprehensive zoning laws or any at all, these decisions can take place without any real transparency. We saw something similar in Ironton, where a data center project essentially started construction overnight, and it was just outside of Ironton City proper's jurisdiction, but it has an Ironton address, I believe, and City Council had no awareness about this until the ribbon cutting ceremony, the day that they broke ground. So I think moratoriums can be an effective tool in that let local officials kind of revisit their zoning regulations and kind of firm those up to prevent future development that takes place behind closed doors without any real democracy or transparency mechanisms. And I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
I think that's a wonderful example of the lack of accountability and it fits the whole history of environmental externalities where companies are doing things without in any way being responsible for the costs that they impose on the community. That's the whole reason we had environmental laws for a while.
Right. And I just wanted to share, I guess, about some of the tactics that the data center industry uses. We reviewed that CRA agreement in Wilmington, and there was very similar language in another CRA agreement between another Amazon data center, and then I think it was Sydney in Shelby County, like exact same language that kind of did not include any real enforcement mechanisms specifically around the job creation elements.
Molly,
So
can
I
I
think
jump in
that
on that?
that's some, yeah,
I talked with the leader in Sydney. They're both using Voris law firm, so they probably
okay.
had the same template. Voris and Berger and Graydon, we're finding, are the two law firms that are responsible for a lot of these agreements in Ohio.
And that makes sense. I think that's just a tactic that they've really leaned on, especially in more governments with lower governmental capacity that might not be taking a fine-tooth comb through all of this. Just because there is a lot of misinformation that's proliferating around the data center issue about all of the economic benefits that it has when other research indicates otherwise.
So we are at the end of the hour, but it's just been packed with information. Before we see if anybody has any more questions, I would like to say, if you would not like to be included on the Faith Communities Go Green mailing list for advocacy, where we send out a newsletter maybe once a month, if you don't want to be on our mailing list, please put your name in the chat. Otherwise, I would like to include you so we can keep you posted. Any additional questions that people have?
There was just one other one about how data centers can actually serve Ohio communities. And I feel like without sufficient guardrails in place that could be advanced at the local or state level, it's hard to make sure that data centers are actually like providing real tangible benefits to the communities that they're investing in. I mean, they pay lower electricity rates per kilowatt than like a residential customer, which is why other like state legislation is important for increasing ratepayer protections. And we would be happy to keep everyone in the loop on future developments at the state level, and also like kind of coordinating all of this across the state, just because there's like we've been fielding a ton of requests from local communities that we just can't keep up with. So I'm thinking it's pretty critical to like build out that network or infrastructure of support, and engage other partners in this work too.
And you'll see when in the slides, there's a link to sign up for your listserv, right?
Yes. And I also I put this in the chat earlier, but Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services has a workshop that's coming up that I think would be really beneficial for this conversation. It's looking at like siting and permitting specifically, and that could be helpful for identifying like the key intervention points to push back at the local level.
We can include that in our March newsletter too.
Awesome.
I think, and I think all of in your slides, everything is hyperlinked, right? So when people get the slideshow, they can click on the hyperlinks and get to your reports and things like that, right?
That's right.
And you all on this call, you can share Jess and Molly's slides with people, right? Is that all right with you, Jess?
Yeah,
I
that's fine.
I think the slides were really absolutely beautiful. Any other questions for the good of the order? And anybody does not want to be included in our monthly email newsletter, just let me know. Great. I want to thank you all for your participation tonight. Grateful for the wonderful energy in this group, and it's very exciting that people came from various parts of the state to join us tonight. Just really excited about that. Really want to thank Jess and Molly for adding this program in on their very hectic lives, and thank them for their work, and know that we'll be praying and cheering for you as you carry it forward. And we hope to be marching along and contributing. Thank you very much, and good night to all.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.